On today's lesson, we're going to cover a very visual aspect of card magic in color changes. Now, color change is a way of changing one card visually from one card to another card. Now, this is to add a little bit of flair or pizzazz to certain card tricks. I think usually it's overdone, especially in the current context of card flourishing and this whole cardistry movement. I think that it's a tad bit overdone and should be slowed down, but I'm kind of an old school guy. So when it comes to color changes, I'm going to show you guys 4 particular color changes that aren't too hard to do and will really get you thinking as to where you could use them and how to use them. I think oftentimes color changes are used in place of patter or even used in place of adding more to the effect just for the sake of its visual nature. So really think as to where you're going to insert these color changes in your current routines to amplify and improve them. You shouldn't just use them willy-nilly. They should serve a purpose. So here, I'm going to show you guys just a couple you guys can play around with. They're not too hard, but hopefully they'll get you thinking in the right direction. So this first color change is actually very, very simple to do, but it's also very easy to look wrong. So here, all you're doing is that you're showing a card, in this case a Joker, and by giving it a shake, it turns into the Ace of Hearts. So this is known as the shake change, the twirl change, the in lieu of the through the fist flourish. It's pretty much been heavily debated where this move came from, but I'm going to say Ed Marlowe because Ed Marlowe. However, Ed Marlowe was the one that gave it the name of the in lieu of the through the fist flourish. So I think that he's the one that most likely than not had the most touches on this. So this is a very simple change to do. All you're doing is you're picking, so you're using your middle finger and your thumb of the right hand, and you're grabbing it on the corners with the pips. So in this case, let's use the Ace of Hearts. You have a break underneath the second card from the top of the deck. So in this case, you could show, in this case, the Ace, and use that to get a break underneath the top card right there, right? So now when you flip this card over, you're ready to pick both cards up at one. You're going to grab it between the thumb and the middle finger here on the opposite corners, just like that. So what's going to happen is that notice your placement of the forefinger. The forefinger is naturally in the middle or off to the side, which is exactly where it needs to be, because the action of the switch is just this. You are revolving the card. So just hold the card from the opposing corners, use your forefinger to spin the card over, and that is the action of the flourish. Now, of course, that is covered by the motion of the shake. So the shake is what covers that action. Now, this is hotly debated as to when to actually do the move. If you do it in the beginning of the shake or if you do it sometime during the middle of the shake, it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. For me personally, I think that different times change the move up. So if you want to make it look like the card is morphing, you do it sometime in the middle. However, if you want like a sudden change, then you do it as you shake the card. So it's just going to be a shake to shake. That's all it is. It's a side-to-side shake. If you want, you could do it up and down. So it really depends on what you want to accomplish. But the main mechanics of the move is that you're using your forefinger to spin the card over as the shake takes place. So really play around with different ways to do the shake. Play around with different ways that you want to make it look. And then eventually you're going to come across something that you like. However, just know that the mechanics are that you're grabbing it in the opposite corners, using your forefinger to spin this over as the shake is taking place. So play around with different ways. Leave in the comments below how you guys prefer to do this, because it is something that is one of those things that requires a little bit of a personal touch. There's no set way to do this. Really, it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to do with the color change. So that is the twirl change or in lieu of the through the fist flourish. Of course, at the end of the previous flourish, you want to make sure that when you complete it, you leave the card on top of the deck, which will let you slide off the single card and just show it to the spectator singly without any sort of gimmick or gaff on it. Because this is one of those visual changes that does look a little bit like it could potentially be a gaff. So it's important to let the spectator look at the card and take heat away from the deck. So that's one thing that you do want to do after. So the next one here is the Erdnase color change. This is a very common color change that you've seen everywhere on the internet, and there are wrong ways to do it and there are right ways to do it. So the color change looks a little bit like this. You take the ace, you rub it, and in that action, it changes into a completely different card and your hand's empty. So there are benefits to this and there are downsides. I'm going to show you guys ways to avoid certain pitfalls of this move. Now, the main downside to this move is this pushing up action that I see a lot of people do. So let's just break down the mechanics of it and then show you ways around the downsides of the move. So pretty much what you're doing, and one of the best tips that I've learned, is you need moisture on your finger and on the palm of your hand. The way I do that is that I lick these two fingers and I transfer that to my palm. The reason I do that is because you're going to need to push this card, and you want there to be not a lot of friction, because then if there isn't a lot of friction, you're just going to slide and the card is going to push off easily. So by licking these fingers and transferring that to the palm, you're going to see that that's going to accomplish and make the move a lot easier, because you're going to be able to push the card with your fingers and draw this card back easier, which is something that you're going to need to do for the move itself. So let's go over that right now. So again, I typically like to lick these two fingers. I don't do this in front of the spectators. I'll just do it beforehand, you know, as I cough or do something like that. But what's going to happen, the action of the move is that you're going to push the card forward, right? With your palm, you're going to draw this card back. So now that this card is being drawn back, this is just the simplified version of it. You're drawing this card back just like this. Then you're going to bring this card up, square it up with the deck, and use your forefinger to push in that card as you reveal the card. That is the basic mechanics of the actual move itself. So that is what is accomplishing the change. So that card is being pushed forward. Your palm is pushing this card back. It's clearing the card. That's very important, that there's a very noticeable click there, and that you are in fact clearing the card on top. So you see there's a clearing action there. This card is getting squared up with the deck as this finger pushes this card in under the cover of your hand and shows it. That is the basics of the move. Now, one of the problems that I found with it is that there's a very overt action of pushing the card. One of the best tips around this is one that I saw by Oz Perlman, where the pushing of the card occurs as the hand is being placed on the card. So you show the hand empty, and your pinky is in contact with the upper non-pip corner of the card. What this does is that as your hand comes in, that is going to naturally push that card forward. So you're not doing an overt pushing action. Just in the action of your hand coming in and being placed on the hand, this card is getting pushed forward just because your pinky is making contact. So your pinky is making contact with the upper right corner. You're coming in. As you turn your hand over, your pinky is actually pushing that card forward just a tad bit. However, this action is more discreet than the overt usual action of pushing this card forward and then drawing this card back. That's, I think, a little bit more discreet. So your pinky pushes this card forward, which pushes it forward away from the deck, unaware, unbeknownst to the spectator. Now your palm naturally comes in contact with that bottom card. If you've moistened that part of your palm, you're going to find that that card is going to draw back very easy. It's going to stick, your palm is going to stick to that card, and it's going to draw back. You're going to feel a click when that card clears the rest of the deck, and now you're just going to come with that card over the cards themselves. At this point, when your fingers are covered, that's when your forefinger pushes in the card, and you could come in and reveal the change. Now, one, again, of the biggest problems of this is that when you push that card forward and draw it back, it's a very noticeable action with your forefinger coming in and pushing the card. So you want to avoid that and only decide to push the card in with your forefinger under the cover of your right hand. So that's when you want to cover it and reveal the change that takes place. So by adding these two little tips, you're going to notice that your color change looks infinitely better than if you were to do this overt pushing action, overt drawing back, and then some sort of weird swipe action like that. Now, I have seen variations of this particular shuffle where the pushing action is overt. So you are pushing that card back and you're doing something like this, where that card changes in this angle. However, that is a little bit more complicated and usually is done with the card face down, so you don't see the change of that. So one way that you could do that looks a little bit like this. That looks like a vanish. I've seen things like that. However, right now, I don't want you guys to overcomplicate things. Just keep to the basic flourish itself, and you're going to see that it looks very, very visual. So that is the Erdnase color change in just a couple touches on that particular move to make it from a very obvious move to something that's a little bit more discreet. So the next one looks a little bit like this, and the reason I call it a bluff color change is because you are essentially bluffing the action here. So the card is the 7 of hearts. It's pretty much like a reverse Erdnase, where you show the 7, changes into the 3, and then you could change it back into the 7. So it's a little bit of a mirage action there, because apparently you don't know, the spectator doesn't know if they're seeing a 3, if they're seeing a 7, but it is one that's pretty simple to do. So for this, one more time, best advice, you want to moisten your hand a little bit. So again, just lick your fingers here, draw it back to the palm. And the exposed action is this. You are pretty much coming in and your palm is going to make contact with the lower right corner of the card, just like this. You're going to see that by putting pressure with that card is just going to pop up into your palm. You see that? So by putting pressure, I'm putting downward pressure with my palm, which is going to draw that card up into my palm and hidden by the rest of that fleshy part of my hand. So the interesting part about this is that from the front, my hands could be pretty wide. They could be pretty wide and you don't see much because my fingers of my right hand are allowing and gliding that card over the fingers so that it looks like there's this free natural movement. However, it's because of the lack of friction between my fingers and that card. So from the front, it just looks like that card changes. However, my fingers are reducing the friction and allowing that card to glide over them. So this is where I could do this little flourishy action in front of it. Now, at some point, I'm going to come back and deposit this card back on it to complete the color change and show that the card is in fact changed back. So from the front, it looks like that card just changes from the 7 to the 3, and then it comes back and changes back to the 7. So it's almost a two-way flourish here. And all that's happening is, again, I'm coming in at an angle. My palm is coming in and contacting the card, which allows it to go up. And my fingertips are allowing for that friction to not take place between me and the card, which gives a little bit of a free appearance. If you want, you could transfer it to the thumb, do this classic sort of a bit here. I think that's a little bit overkill. Definitely, that's a little bit overkill with this action. But you are able to come in and wipe the card and show its transformation back to the 7. Another hot tip on this is that when you do it, you want to make sure that your forefinger's in the front so that when the card is deposited on top of the deck, your forefinger has squared it up with the rest of the card. So you don't have an action like this where the card comes in squared up with that. So one more time. You see it looks very, very good. So the next one here is a move done by Paul Harris that could be used as a color change. I've seen it used by numerous magicians. However, for this, you're going to see that it's a very visual change because it apparently takes place in midair. So for this, you show the ace of diamonds, and in transferring it from one hand to the other, you see that the card changes into the king of spades. Now, you could do this again. I wouldn't recommend it, but you see that it's a very visual change because it takes place apparently in midair. So let's go over the mechanics of this particular move. You're showing the ace of diamonds, and in this action, that's what allows you to get a break underneath the top card of the deck. So you replace that card, and the grip is as follows. Now, I like to show the card this way. So all I'm doing here is that with my break, I'm using my thumb to push up, and I'm balancing that card between my thumb and my forefinger, which allows me to come in and show this card fairly singly to the spectator. So I just come in, and with my forefinger, I'm putting pressure so that the double doesn't split. And from here, I could regrip with my thumb and my middle finger this card, which allows me to come in and re-grab the card with my right hand. So one more time, I'm coming in with my right thumb. I'm putting pressure with my forefinger so I could extend this card and show the spectator. My thumb and my middle finger of the left hand, pinch the card and grab it from both ends, making sure the card is square, so that now I could come in and grip the card in this particular way. So my thumb is on top, my middle finger is on the bottom, and my forefinger is putting a little bit of pressure, which is bowing the card. Now, what's going to happen is that I'm releasing the pressure from my thumb. You're not going to release the pressure from your middle finger because if you do that, you're going to end up flipping the card this way. So when you release pressure with your thumb, you're going to see that card is going to tend to flip. All I'm doing one more time is releasing pressure with my thumb. That's going to cause the card and the card behind it to flip. Now, what you want to make sure is that when you actually complete the move, the card is squared with the rest of the deck. That is going to be the difficult part about this color change. But just the actual action itself, one more time, you're just releasing pressure from your thumb. You're going to see that when you release that pressure from your thumb, the card is going to do one flip in midair and land face up on top of the deck. Now, of course, you're adding that card behind it so that when you actually execute the move itself, it looks like the card changes as it comes in contact with the deck, which is exactly what you want to go for. So just some tips on squaring this up. Notice the position of my fingers. The position of my fingers is very important in the left hand because that's what's going to allow that card to come in, slide, and land on top of the deck with the deck squared up. So make sure that your fingers are in this proper position, forefinger on top, cards on the side, just standard mechanics grip, so that when the card comes in from the other hand, it's squared up with the deck naturally. So that is the instant replay color change. That is a fairly simple color change to do, but you're going to see that it's one that's very flourishy and very visual because the card changes apparently as it comes in contact with the deck. So those have been 4 color changes that you guys can incorporate to your card routines. Again, it's very important to think as to when you're going to do these color changes because people tend to overdo it. And much like cardistry, cardistry is very impressive to spectators for a minute. And if you just continue doing the same thing, to them, it's almost as if you've done the same thing over and over again. I'm not saying that there isn't value in it. I'm saying that there's a way of doing it correctly and a way of doing it incorrectly. Color changes are one of those things that people tend to, they'll do like a whole bunch of stuff and then the card changes about 12,000 times. Slow down. I mean, one color change is enough to impress a spectator and is enough to cause people to gasp. So imagine you build it up, Queen of Hearts, that's on the card, and then of course you do a color change. That visual nature of the move is enough to blow people up. You don't need to do another color change. You don't need to do a follow-up. You don't need to do about 1,000 different changes. So slow it down, and you're going to see that that's going to reward you more in the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed those. I hope you guys practice those. They do require a tad bit of practice to accomplish correctly. And let me know in the comments below what you guys use for these. So thank you very much for being part of the Academy. Hope to see you on the next one.